Beloved rescuer fatally mauled. Ohio grandmother mauled to death by deer she tried to rescue and domesticate. An Ohio grandmother lost her life after being viciously attacked by a deer she had rescued and was attempting to rehabilitate on her property. 64-year-old Jody Broker, a longtime animal lover and licensed wildlife rehabilitator, was found fatally injured inside a pen with a buck at her home in Belmont County on the evening of November 15. Now let's dive deeper into this story here on the AI podcast.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking on a story that is, it's just incredibly complex and heart-wrenching.
It really is.
It gets right to the core of what happens when deep compassion meets the brutal unpredictability of the wild. We're diving into the source material about the life and the tragic death of Jody Proger, who was a dedicated, licensed wildlife rehabilitator in Ohio.
And this is a story that I think it really requires us to look past the initial shock of it all. We have to focus on the paradox the source is present.
What do you mean by paradox?
Well, you have a woman who gave over a decade of her life to saving injured deer. She was incredibly successful, built a whole community around this work.
Right.
But that same dedication ultimately led to this irreversible tragedy with one of the bucks in her care.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive. We need to unpack the specific chilling facts of what happened.
Yeah.
But then we have to pivot. We have to understand the context of her 12-plus years of this very specialized work.
And analyze the relationships she built with these animals, because the distinction between her successes and the animal that caused the fatal attack, I mean, that tells us everything about the limits of human intervention.
So to start, I think it's vital to establish who Jody Proger was, because the sources are very clear on this. She was an expert.
Absolutely. This wasn't some casual hobby.
So let's set the scene. Proger was 64 years old, a grandmother, and she was an officially licensed wildlife rehabilitator.
And she ran this whole rescue mission from her 5-acre farm in Stewartsville, Ohio, with her husband.
Okay, so the incident itself, it happened late on the evening of November 15th.
Right. Around 11 p.m., deputies get this urgent call, an animal attack on her property.
And what they found, I mean, it confirmed the absolute worst.
Yeah.
Proger was discovered inside a pen with a mature buck. She had sustained, fatal injuries.
Pronounced dead right there at the scene.
Right there. And the Belmont County Sheriff, James Zusak, he made it official pretty quickly. No suspicion of foul play at all.
This was, as hard as it is to say, just a direct consequence of dealing with a powerful wild animal.
What really stands out in the sources, though, is the sequence of events, the desperation leading up to the authorities even arriving.
And it started with her daughter, Jennifer Bryan. She was the first to realize something was really wrong.
I found that detail so chilling and so modern.
Me too.
Her daughter said she got worried not because of a missed call, but because her mom, who was always active, had just gone silent on Facebook.
Wow.
That unusual silence was the signal that there was a crisis.
And that realization, it prompted immediate action. The daughter sent her husband, so Proger's son-in-law, to the farm.
And he's the one who discovered the attack as it was happening.
A desperate situation. The sources say he actually grabbed a firearm, intending to
try and stalk the animal and save her.
Exactly. But the police arrived at almost the same moment.
And they saw just how dangerous the situation was. I mean, the buck was still aggressive, a threat to everyone there.
So law enforcement took action immediately. They euthanized the buck before the son-in-law could even get a clear shot.
It just shows how fast and overwhelming it all was.
Absolutely. But it does leave this one small mystery the family mentioned.
Okay.
Her daughter, Bryan, she confirmed the deer was one they cared for, but they weren't sure how the attack even started. Specifically, she said the buck had somehow gotten out of its main enclosure.
That detail about the enclosure really stuck with me. The sources keep stressing she was licensed. That implies, strict standards.
It does.
So you have to wonder, did the facility have some kind of known flaw? Or was this just a case of the animal's sheer force breaching the pen?
That's a critical question, and the immediate reports don't fully answer it. But what we do know is that as a licensed rehabilitator, she would have had to meet specific state requirements for containing large animals like deer.
So this wasn't a backyard operation?
Not at all. Her license implies specialized training, probably facility inspections, and following strict protocols for handling and release. She knew the risks.
And her daughter made that so clear. She said her mom fully understood the dangers, but the fulfillment she got from it, it just outweighed those risks for her.
For more than 12 years, yeah. And to really get the depth of that commitment, you have to look at the incredible success that came before this tragedy.
And that success, the whole origin of her passion, really centers on one animal, a fawn named Weezer.
Right. Her entire mission started back in 2013 with Weezer. He was rescued after his mother was killed in a road accident. That was the moment that just changed everything for Proger.
What's so fascinating is the context here. She took Weezer home not because she wanted a pet, but because there were no deer sanctuaries in Ohio at the time that could handle a fawn needing that much intensive care.
She literally stepped in to fill a gap.
She did.
And that necessity, it led to this incredible level of human intervention. I mean, she didn't just care for him. She achieved what's known as complete imprinting.
So for anyone listening, what does imprinting mean in this context?
It means the fawn learned to see humans, specifically Jody Proger, as its parent, its main source of security. So he was, for all intents and purposes, domesticated.
And the proof of that domestication is just incredible. Weezer was neutered. He was housebroken.
Behaved more like a pet dog than a wild deer.
Totally. She built this huge online following, the Weezer Warriors, who followed their story.
And that success is a really important case study in what's called habituation. To keep a male deer safely in a home, she had to take proactive steps. Neutering was key.
Why was that so important?
Because it removes the seasonal hormonal surges, the testosterone that triggers aggression in bucks. She even posted pictures of him celebrating holidays, just lounging around the house.
We found this perfect quote from a 2015 interview she did with the dodo. It just captures it all. She said, "He'll climb up on the love seat, watch a little TV, and crash there."
That image says everything, doesn't it? The completely blurred line between wild and domestic that she somehow managed to create.
But this right here, this is the critical point in our deep dive.
It is.
Proger had two very different experiences. She had the highly successful, neutered, totally socialized Weezer.
The pinnacle of her compassion.
And the family was absolutely clear on this. Weezer was not the deer involved in the attack.
So if Weezer represents that successful intervention,
Then the attacking buck, a mature, aggressive, and clearly intact male, represents the exact opposite. It's the failure of that habituation. It's the raw, unyielding power of nature.
and this brings us to the technical context the sources don't spell out, but that is so important. The biology of the danger. The attack happened in November. That timing is crucial.
Why November?
Because November is the peak of the rutting season for white-tailed deer.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What does rutting season actually do to a buck's behavior to make it so aggressive?
During the rut, a male deer's testosterone levels just surge. They go through the roof, and it completely transforms their behavior.
So even a calm deer can change.
Oh, absolutely. Even a buck that seemed docile or was used to humans can become incredibly volatile, aggressive, and just obsessed with dominance. They are biologically wired to fight.
And they lose their fear of humans.
They do. They start to see any large creature, including a person, as a potential rival to be challenged.
So that animal's core instinct to fight, to dominate, it's just amplified by its own body chemistry.
Exactly.
And that makes that mystery of the broken enclosure seem a lot less mysterious.
It does. A buck driven by that hormonal intensity has incredible strength and a powerful motive to break through any barrier.
And these are not small animals.
No. A mature buck can weigh 250, even 300 pounds. You combine that size with sharp, powerful antlers, which are basically weapons, and the risk becomes astronomical. This context is essential to see that this wasn't random. It was a biological imperative clashing with a human presence.
So that contrast between the neutered Weezer and the dangerous, intact buck, that's the whole story right there.
That's the paradox of her work. She built this whole community, the Weezer Warriors, based on the emotional reward of saving a life. Her obituary called her an avid animal lover who spent her life advocating for wildlife.
And she was educating others, right? Providing resources?
Yes. She leveraged the heartwarming story of Weezer to promote kindness. But that emotional success may have, and this is something you have to consider, it may have blurred the line for her between what was possible with an imprinted, non-breeding animal.
And what was realistic with a mature, hormonal, wild male.
Exactly.
But wait, if she was a licensed rehabilitator, wouldn't she have had really strict protocols for handling bucks during the rut Does her success with Weezer maybe suggest she underestimated the volatility of the other buck?
That is the core question this whole tragedy forces us to confront. Her license means she had the training, she knew the protocols. But the sources suggest that the level of trust and emotional investment she had, especially with the animals she kept long term, it might have led to a moment of tragic miscalculation. A misjudgment of the safe distance needed with a rutting buck, even in what she thought was a controlled space.
The wild instinct just holds the ultimate trump card.
Always.
And her family's final tribute, it just drives home her lifelong commitment. They ask that instead of flowers, people make donations to local animal shelters.
It's a fitting capstone. It connects her personal mission right back to the broader world of animal welfare she championed.
And it brings us back to the synthesis of this entire deep dive.
Right, the profound dedication, the specialized knowledge, and then the ultimate unavoidable collision with raw biological instinct.
She literally spent her life intervening where nature had failed these animals. And yet that wildness she tried to heal is what ultimately cost her everything.
The sources paint a clear picture. She was experienced, she was compassionate, she was successful. But even all that experience couldn't stop the biological reality of an aggressive buck in rut.
So this brings us to the most difficult part of this. We've seen her dedication, her licensed success with Weezer. What does this tragedy really tell us about the ultimate limits of human intervention?
I mean, it raises a profound question for anyone in wildlife rehabilitation. Especially with large or powerful animals, you have to ask where the line is drawn.
The line between what?
Between our very human desire to rescue and save an animal and the need to prioritize that animal's wild integrity and human safety.
It leaves you with this final, really provocative thought, doesn't it? If a licensed expert, a true Weezer warrior with over a decade of success, can still fall victim to an animal's instinct, then what does that say about the ethics of habituating wildlife at all? Is there a point where we have to admit that some animals, especially mature males driven by hormones, can never truly be safe? And maybe intervention should only ever be about getting them healthy enough to be released back into the wild, not kept in long-term residence.
It forces us to balance the high emotional rewards of our compassion with the inescapable and sometimes tragic risks of biology.
A tough, but absolutely necessary consideration to draw from these sources. Thank you for walking us through this today.
A necessary deep dive.
Okay, one question for you. Could this incident have been prevented with different safety measures or enclosure designs? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.